Hello and welcome to the Queen Bee podcast, where the stories of regional women come alive, resonate and inspire. I'm your host, Tanya Rutherford, and together with a passionate team of women, we've painted this landscape for you. In truth, this podcast is about gathering the stories of women who live in regional and remote Australia to bridge those gaps, to create communities, and of course, to tell the richness in their journeys. Now, if anything does come up for you today, please be kind to yourself. You can share it with us, whether that's through our socials, our Queen Bee community, or you can send us a DM. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Queen Bee podcast. Joining me today is the lovely Mary Bolling, who is actually in Melbourne. So we are breaking our own little only regional women rule a bit, but I promise it's for a reason, a really good reason. She is a media expert, podcast host, and storyteller. And Mary and her friend Kate have a parenting podcast based on Queensland's own cartoon series, Bluey. Welcome, Mary.
Tanya, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. If you can send the rain up north, we'll be even better.
We'll do anything we can to get rid of it. So yes, let's even this out.
So I'd love to know a bit about your own journey. So where did you grow up and what is the attraction of Melbourne?
Okay, so that's a good question and a big question. And yeah, I must admit my kind of skin prickles being introduced as a Melbourne girl, because yes, I'm in Melbourne and that's been me for a very long time, but grew up all over regional Victoria and regional South Australia. And yeah, I don't know if it's something about growing up in the country, but it's hard to lose that identity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, yes, I will forever be a country kid and take any excuse I can to get back regional. As well as living in medium and quite small communities. As I grew up, we moved a lot as a family, which was quite defining in, that having to pull up stumps and start again in a new place. And on top of that, my family, and I'm the eldest of 7 kids, were a homeschooling family for a lot of that. So talking about how you define yourself, it's kind of an outsider on the outside because, I think, not to speak for all regional people, but a country kid sort of sees themselves in a different way, a bit outside the norm. Yeah, when you're a homeschooling country kid, that really is the next step of, do I belong in these parts? But I was lucky that I found a lot of belonging in homeschooling communities and sport communities, and eventually in a really welcoming community of little baby journalists when I moved to Melbourne to finally study journalism as well.
Cool. And so having moved a lot, was there any particular place that kind of resonated as where you would see yourself as being home?
Look, I think I don't have that, to be honest, Tanya, because probably the biggest move for our family was when I was 12. I got plucked out of Bendigo, which is in central Victoria, and probably a lot of your listeners would know, to a tiny place called Birchip, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere in the Mallee in Victoria. I think when we moved in, there were 800 people. So someone very happily updated the sign to 808 or 809. And that was very defining because, there's suddenly, in a town that size, everyone knows you and you start to think, well, how am I being seen from the outside? Because you're very conscious that, there's the town all kind of convenes to talk about what's happening in the town, and a family moving in is big news. So that was, we were only there for 4 years, but that was definitely 4 years, but that was 4 formative years and probably, the place I'm connected to the most.
Okay, cool. I actually grew up in Bendigo, so I spent a lot of time in Bendigo.
And have you heard of Birchip?
Yes, I have heard of it.
Okay, you really are local.
For sure. I don't know if I ever went there, but I have heard of it.
Look, it's still there. I
Yeah.
have confirmed.
There's only 799 people or
But
800.
it might have gone down a bit, yeah. And yeah, it's the plight of lots of those small farming
Yeah.
communities. Yeah, just like, I left town to go study. It happens to so many of the kids leaving school.
Yeah. Yeah. And so journalism, what was the attraction?
Look, I think I was one of those lucky in a way kids that just had the seed planted at the right time. I loved writing and playing with words, and someone said, oh, you should think about journalism, which is actually, wanting to write is actually not a reason at all to go into journalism in retrospect. It's a terrible reason to think, oh yes, I'm obviously a journalist. And yeah, even though I probably ran with that from the age of 12, I don't think it was till I was actually at uni that I realized, oh, so there's a lot of, picking up the phone and talking to strangers, which wasn't my naturally comfortable place. And
Yeah.
just fronting up and not being the shy kid in the corner. But because I hadn't had a lot of time to reflect on that, and suddenly I was in the course and going with it, I had to run with it. So and yeah, it was a happy mistake to make from my part, because yes, I found I didn't just like writing. I loved the storytelling. I love people and the things that connect us all, and how we connect. So much of that is stories. And in my 3 years of journalism at RMIT, I did a lot of connecting, just so many opportunities from that. There was a student radio station at the university, and a bunch of us all started by doing the 2 a.m. shift, and just like turned up in the middle of the night to be on air and awkwardly chat to the world, or whoever was listening, which probably wasn't the world secretly. But yeah, it was kind of baptism by fire, and I came out the other side of it very, very passionate for the career.
Awesome. And so what happened then? Where did that take you?
So it took me, luckily, to a cadetship at the Herald Sun in Melbourne, which is still Melbourne's biggest selling daily newspaper. And that was, again, just really thrown in the deep end. On day one, you're in there and, okay, well, this is your story, go and write it. And admittedly, a lot of those stories when you're a little baby journalist one that springs to mind is, oh, look, we've got some lovely photos of a dog and a sheep that are best friends, and we're going to run these photos over a 2-page spread and just some words to go around it about the heartwarming relationship between this dog and sheep. It's just like, oh my gosh. But luckily, being an enthusiastic writer, like way back to 12-year-old Mary, meant, I could play with that. There's so many, woolly puns to tap into. I can't remember any of them off the top of my head, but those stories were like a playground. But then the flip side was, and this was sort of something that was very much kind of hammered in through the journalism degree, and then confronted face to face in my cadetship and working as a daily news reporter. So much of news is presented as confrontation. So the journalist is trained like you've got to go and confront the offender outside court, or you've got to go and work your way into the house to do. I'd never heard of a death knock before I studied journalism, and I hope most people haven't had to kind of hear of that. But what it is if a big tragedy happens and there's someone has died, and the grieving family is kind of rallying around, the journalist goes to the door of that house and says, would you like to tell your story? And it's certainly not a comfortable place for me. Some journalists claim to thrive on it, but so much of how we were trained in journalism was, you've got to, that's your job. You've just got to, don't worry about being uncomfortable. You just shove yourself in there and see how it goes. And that conflict and confrontation, I look back now, and as much as you had to run with it day to day in a daily newsroom. Yeah, it certainly wasn't kind of, I hadn't found a way to align it with my values. And and I think a lot of why journalism is so much less consumed now compared to 10, 20, 30 years ago is because so much of it is confrontational rather than the then an opportunity for people to connect and feel like they're telling their stories in a way that empowers them.
Yeah. Wow. And so what then got you out of Melbourne?
Okay, well, so fast forward through probably 15 years as a journalist. I worked at the Herald Sun and then freelanced and traveled for a long time, and then worked at ABC News Breakfast and ABC Radio, and found much more of a rhythm in finding interesting people and telling interesting stories, and was loving doing that, but then was finding my own interesting person in my now husband, Adrian. And when we got engaged, he was about to jump on a plane up to Gladstone in central Queensland and work as an environmental scientist up there. And I was at a stage in my career where I'm like, well, look, I can follow along and I'm sure I'll find something to do. And that something to do actually came pretty quickly. I think within a week there was a news editor job advertised at the Gladstone Observer, which was a daily print paper at the time. And so within a fortnight I had a job to go to. So Gladstone was already looking pretty good, and I hadn't even stepped off the plane.
Yeah, awesome. And so what was that then like? Because you'd gone from having a very transient rural or regional kind of experience to being in metro to then turning up in Gladstone, which is very much a kind of industrial kind of focus. What was that like for you?
I think I was tapping back into my teenage years of moving all over regional Victoria and just arriving open, and this is a fresh start. And a fresh start is a gift in my mind. Like, it's certainly every time I moved, it was, some sad partings, but more the excitement of, okay, how are you going to make it work and who are you going to meet? So I think I landed in Gladstone very enthusiastically. I had the extra benefit of, I told my partner, look, prepared to move across the country for you, but I am going to check that there is a roller derby team before I get there. And that is kind of a key thing here. And there was. So, I'd been playing roller derby in Melbourne, and then got to Gladstone and was straight into a league of lovely, enthusiastic local girls and guys. And I think that, like, I don't know if you've had similar experiences, Tanya, but finding your people, or just finding something to join when you get to a new community just makes such a difference.
And I know when I haven't had that, it's been extremely hard. And that was when I moved up here, because I moved in with my now husband in the middle of the country, and you're kind of like, I didn't have, because we were getting to know each other, I wasn't then going out to meet other people, and so then it was very isolating.
I think I benefited from the fact, and probably lots of your listeners could relate to a similar scenario. He was working like 6 days a week on an island where he was out the door before, I think it was, before 5, and not getting home until dinner time, or later. And that's a long day to fill in between. So you kind of like, okay, who's out there? What's out there? What can I latch on to? And then working at the paper as well. There's regional media can be such a lifeblood of a community, but whether it's the lifeblood or whether it's sort of on its last gasp, which the Observer absolutely was, it's still just an incredible way to get a bird's eye view of how a community is operating, and the grievances and the achievements and what we're proud of and what we want to sweep under the carpet and all those things. So yeah, I felt like I was, really grappling with that day to day in my new job as well. So you kind of have to find alliances and friends and where the good coffees are and all those things pretty quickly.
Yep. Cool. And so then family.
And yeah, so I have two smallish boys now. Bon and Cass are 7 and 5, and we was actually pregnant with Bon when Adrian's job finished in Gladstone, and I was able to, like, well, obviously Melbourne's home to go to. By that stage, I was working at Central Queensland University, where I had so many lovely colleagues, including yourself. And yeah, that was the decision to move back to Melbourne. Just had the kind of added bonus of, taking my pregnant belly back home to family and friends and all that kind of thing. But got to take my Central Queensland University job to Melbourne as well, because CQU has a Melbourne campus in the middle of the city, and felt very lucky to be making that work.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it's normally the opposite, where you're leaving the big smoke to move to the country and you want to take a job with you rather than the other way around.
That is true. I guess it's a rare kind of regional organization that has outposts. Don't get me wrong, Rockhampton is still very much the center of the universe for my work and for the uni. But yeah, the little backwater of Melbourne gets to have a campus, and I definitely benefit from that.
Yeah. So what have been some of the challenges that you've experienced on your journey?
Look, I think I've had a few kind of resets along the way in my career, and just in life, I guess. Like you mentioned, family, big things happen, and you kind of take stock, or you drown and then realize, I should have been taking stock, which is more my approach. But yeah, I think taking stock when I had kids was very much put me on a path to where I am now, making podcasts, because being at home all day every day with a new baby, I knew the outside world was still out there somewhere, but there are, even with your social media feeds and even with lovely friends and family checking in, it does feel that bit more distant than it used to be. And listening to podcasts and listening in a way that I was almost chatting back to the voices in my ear. And, one that was my absolute go-to was Annabelle Crabb and Lee Sales podcast, which is a bit of an Australian juggernaut. Those two amazing lady journalists just chat all things, what they're reading and what they're watching. And I'm like, oh, yeah, these are things I would like to be. It was very aspirational. I don't think I read a book the whole time. Listening and thinking, oh, yes, I'll read that and that and that. But yeah, that was just such a kind of key experience that, this is a form of media that really is connecting with me day to day, and I feel like motivated by it. I feel like, like I would go on deep dives of different TV shows, and what they were recommending, I was kind of taking further. And yeah, I realized that, well, this is a medium that anyone can connect with. And if you find your people, you get that sense of community, just like, you get in a new regional town if you manage to land it right. So yeah, that was a big kind of one for me. And I've been making podcasts really ever since I had my boys, both for Central Queensland Uni and for fun for me.
Fun.
Yeah.
So talking about the for fun, tell us a bit more about the healers in your life.
Oh, where to begin? They are deeply in my life, I've got to say. So Bluey, I feel like most people know Bluey by now, but if you don't, it's a
they've ever shopped in the children's department of anything.
Oh, they're everywhere. It's a 7-minute episode cartoon about a family of healer dogs that live in Brisbane and kind of, have very little prosaic slice of life adventures that are just so relatable to anyone who's ever met a kid, let alone is living that experience. Yep. So Bluey just kind of dropped onto ABC TV screens at the end of 2018. I'd just gone on maternity leave with my second little boy then, and I was finding catch up with friends who were all in a similar situation to me. We were, debriefing on the sleeps and the solids and, all the day-to-day stuff. But then pretty quickly the conversation would get around to, hey, did you see that episode of Bluey? Like, what do you think was happening there? Would you do that, what that parent did, or would you do that? And it just was so, we felt like we were, like, are the dogs imitating us? Are we imitating the dogs? It was all getting very immersive. So me and my co-host Kate McMahon, who's got 3 little kids and lives in Adelaide and is a former journalist as well and in comms, thought, okay, we need to actually start talking through this. And we just got a mic and started recording. And I think 200 episodes later, we've recapped most of the Bluey episodes. So we take an episode, we deep dive it from a point of view of the parenting theory, but then also the child psychology and the playfulness is just such a big part of Bluey. We so often there's like kind of little 90s pop culture references in there because the makers, I guess, are a similar generation to us and planting their childhoods in the show as well. And the music in Bluey is just transformative. It's the most beautifully scored kids show I've ever encountered. So we talk a lot about music as well. And these are all, like, we love being parents. We love music. We love all these things. And Bluey just kind of bundled all that up and put it on our laps. And there are lots of Bluey podcasts now, but we're still proudly the original. So we it's an entirely kind of passion project just for fun when we find time. But it's become really meaningful to us, I think.
Yeah, and I can understand why you can do, like, a lot of shows you can, you might be able to sort of make some comments, but I love the Bluey series because it's almost like it gives you permission to be playful and to not have to be that serious stereotype of a parent, but you can actually engage and build a connection, relationship in a different way. Completely. And have fun while you're doing it.
And like, I don't know if you found this in your younger days of parenting as well, Tanya, but there's, parenting books are the oldest books in the world. The people have been being told how to parent for forever. And, often from the previous generation who may or may not have been getting it right, but to actually distill it all when you're in the sleeplessness and the chaos and everything else is really hard. So as a comms person, the way Bluey just kind of, the creators, and huge respect to the writer Joe Brum, who Bluey just tumbled out of his head and his life as a dad of 2 girls. And I'm sure it wasn't tumbled, I'm sure it was much more painful than that, but he says he's not trying to teach anyone anything. He's just putting it out there. But it's a masterclass in how to, communicate in a way that inspires people and people can aspire to, because it's funny and it's fun. And it's just really, I feel like, it's changed my life as a parent. Like, I felt like, I had a fairly good handle on what parenting involved, but it had never occurred to me in so many words as you play as a parent. And that's my whole philosophy now.
And I know we were talking before the podcast about how I diffuse my girl's temper by being really stupid and annoying, and after a while they just laugh and then it's all gone. And that's kind of the thing that I've got from that Bluey experience. It's okay to be silly and to have fun and to, enjoy that time the way that
Yeah,
they're enjoying it.
completely. And it's such good, like, hearing that from you. You know, I was definitely taking mental notes, and there's so many experts out there, but I think a lot of them probably feel like they're yelling into the void to actually get this through to parents, and all they needed was just a little family of dogs.
Yeah, that people watch, like, I mean,
Mm.
even now. So my girls are 9 and 11,
Yep.
11 tomorrow. And
Happy birthday,
we
Molly.
still will have, every now and then, they'll put Bluey on, and we will be, as a family, we all watch it. Like, because even, you know, my husband Wade and myself, we enjoy it as much as the kids. And so, yeah, it does engage you. And I think that is one of the beauties of really good storytelling, is that everyone can connect to an element of it, and feel like they're relating to it, and able to be part of that.
Completely.
Yeah. So, okay, going back to little Mary leaving Bendigo, going to Birchip. What would you, if you could go back and give yourself a message, what do you think you might tell yourself?
Oh, look, so much. I really need to be, I needed to be sat down, to be honest.
You write a story. And
I think, you know, get onto the internet. There's a lot of answers out there. You know, it was still just emerging at that stage. And yeah, going in blind to a journalism degree, or going in blind to anything. Hopefully it doesn't happen as much these days, because everyone can access that level of research. But yeah, on the personal stuff, I think it would be own your experience and own your stories. And I think, I don't know if this is relatable to a lot of, you know, people who grow up regional, but because the city's always held up as, you know, the destination and the final goal, and if you don't make it there, you know, what are you doing? Which really has not been the experience of my career at all. And I didn't have that feeling in so many words as a kid, but that was definitely the goal.
Yeah.
But I think if I'd kind of seen the differences I had, and that it counts homeschooling and country life and all that kind of thing as assets, I wouldn't have had that kind of looking over my shoulder, am I meant to be here kind of feeling. So yeah, I've done a lot of, you know, personal work about you know, feeling like I'm enough, and growing confidence instead of bravado, which I probably had a lot of bravado back then. But yeah, actual confidence is, I think, should be the end game for little 12-year-old Mary. So I hope she's listening.
Oh, lovely. And what message would you give other regional women? So I know you're not regional at the moment, but in knowing what that environment is like, what advice would you give them when it comes to combining or juggling perhaps family, job, and a passion project, if they're not
Completely. Yeah. Look, it's all my advice. Like, my approach and my advice is always do it, but it's with a caveat, I guess. Do it in a way that connects. So I know a lot of the advice in business circles, and certainly a lot of the advice, you know, given to little journalists, is you need to get contacts, and you need to know who to call, and, you know, you need to find all these people and get their numbers. But actually, don't get their numbers, like, get their stories. Like, if you're actually building connection in all these things that you do, whether it's career or whether it's, you know, your ridiculous Bluey based passion project, like, it's, you know, that's really it's just so valuable for what can keep you going. And, you know, Kate and I many times have you know, barely gotten another episode out and kind of collapsed over the line with Gotta Be Done. But you know, hearing back from people, and the the real like connection we forged by being the voice in people's ear of people we don't even know has been so affirming and lovely. And it's made me really take stock of, well, how I connect with people in the real world as well as, you know, in podcast communities.
Yeah, I love that. And is there anything else you might like to share while you're here?
Oh, look, I think on podcasts, it's another passion project for me, but within CQU, I get to make a podcast that I just absolutely love. It came out of the pandemic and it's called How to Change a Life, which, you know, I would love your listeners obviously have excellent taste in podcasts, Tanya. I would love their feedback on it, because it's something that started, you know, when my team within the university, a lot of people at the uni, a lot of our students were all kind of like just taking stock and like, what are we meant to be doing when life changes this much on us? And we couldn't plan for this. And, you know, a lot of what we do because we do it kind of went out the window. This podcast was about finding people who'd made a big decision in their life and, you know, what happened next, essentially. So it tells usually an inspiring story. I've been inspired by all the stories, but also, you know, really drilling down into the motivations and the values and I guess, you know, the unexpected twists and turns that making a life that makes a difference kind of makes as well. So, yeah, look, that's a little plug, but I genuinely would love to hear from your listeners on that one as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Tanya, it's so lovely chatting. I can hear your Queensland birds in the background. It's they're singing to my country girl heart. So thank you.
It was chickens earlier and they would not stop celebrating laying eggs. It was driving me crazy.
Tell them from me they've done a great job. That's it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, today we've been yarning with Mary Bolling, former journalist and producer across print, TV and radio, currently working remotely with CQ University as communications advisor and passionate about parenting messages through animated media and all things Bluey, with their podcast having over 1.4 million downloads and a global audience. I checked it out just before. You can find her and her co-host Kate by searching Gotta Be Done in your podcast app or visit www.blueypod.com and we'll make sure we've got the link available for people. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Tanya, it's been joyful. Thank you.
The Queen Bee podcast delves into the heart of regional women's experiences, their aspirations, challenges, and journeys. It's a platform that celebrates their individuality, their resilience, and their ambition. These tales of reinvention, adaptation, inspiration, and the power of connections.